So, welcome everybody, and thank you once again for tuning in to this new episode of B&B with Ellie, Biohacking and Beyond. And today I have a really special guest. She is a member of GHK Global, which is a group of the thought leaders in the English-speaking world of GNM or Germanic New Medicine. And her name is Nellie Barnett. Hi, Nellie.
Hi, Ellie.
Thank you so much for being here. I know you're super busy, but Nellie, why don't you start off with telling us how you got started, what you do, where you're located, and all of that.
For sure. So I'm based in Western Australia, down in the beautiful south. We pretty much live in paradise here, which is amazing. So anyone coming to visit, make sure you come and say hi down in the southwest of WA. I've been here about 8 years. Before that, I was in Sydney for some time. I did some traveling. I'm originally from Adelaide. Moving over here kind of coincides with my journey into German new medicine as well. So we moved here about 9 years ago now. And just a little way into that, I was introduced to a friend of my partner's. I'd been in a really high stress corporate job for a while, and I just knew that my body wasn't working at its optimal state. And so my partner introduced me to his friend. And in that, this guy was a kinesiologist, and we had a session. We spoke about fasting as well, which is sort of where my business started from, because I ended up going on a month-long fast. But in that same conversation, there was a seed dropped about German new medicine. And it was just, mentioned in passing kind of thing. And I was like, what is that? And he gave me, a little 1-paragraph spiel on it. And it was instant for me. It was so instant. I was like, oh my goodness, this is exactly, what I've been looking for. This absolutely feels like a truth. This is like putting a language to everything that I've intuitively known for a lifetime, but never quite had the substance to put to it or the language to put to it. It was kind of in the realm of Louise Hayes and her metaphysical kind of associations, but it really nailed it scientifically. And that very much satisfied my brain because I'm very open to all these things. I always believed in emotional root causes, but I also have a very scientific brain and a brain that wants to know why and how and like show me some data. So GHK was just like nailed it for me. And I jumped straight into exploring it and studying it. Pretty much no one knew what I was talking about here in Australia back 8 years ago. It was a very lone wolf path. But yeah, it just rang so much truth. It was like coming home for me, I call it. And so that's where, GNM began for me. If you want to go back a step further than that, I've got a history that's very rich in experience, I guess you could say.
Please.
Yeah, been through a whole myriad of experiences through life, some like not so fun at the time, but they all make sense now. And German new medicine, Germanic healing knowledge has really been a pathway to understanding those experiences, following symptoms to, just understand myself better and understand how I perceive things at the time. So GHK has really made a lot of sense of my past, which is beautiful. So there's, so many benefits and values to having this knowledge in our lives for sure. And from there, my business kind of kicked off. I started out in the world of guided fasting because people were asking me what I was doing. And I started integrating GHK into that right away. And I was already seeing it in action and really observing results with it. So I kind of took it and ran with it. And I've now studied with multiple teachers across the world. And, I like to collect information from lots of different sources. There's lots of different perspectives is super helpful. And then, so that's kind of come together. And now I guess I like to think that I'm kind of leading the way in teaching and sharing GHK in Australia. It's definitely starting to get out there, just especially in the last few years. People, when I say GHK, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard about that, as opposed to what on earth is that?
Absolutely.
So that's, great to see that community building. That's kind of me in a nutshell.
That is so cool. I have so many questions. But you're right that there is an explosion this year, and there's such a big difference. Like so many people are starting to come out with it, and you start to follow people on IG and Facebook, and there's always a reference to mother-child or partner side and things of that nature. And because it deals with the laws of nature, and the laws of nature deal with everything. So it's pretty amazing to see. So I'm really interested in what you said about fasting. So I've been looking through your website, and yes, there is guided fasting. Fasting is a biohacking trend. It's a biohacking practice. It's one of the favorites. Dave Asprey, my mentor, actually wrote a book all about fasting. But what I love is that you're sort of combining it with GNM GHK. And let me know, what is the link between the two, or how are you using or synergizing the two practices of GNM GHK and fasting in your practice with your clients?
Yeah, for sure. So I weave a lot of different things into my work. I like to say that GNM GHK is like the underpinning roadmap that is the foundation of all of my work. And then I have multiple modalities and tools that I can bring into that to help support people through the biological programs in alignment with the principles of GNM GHK. So yeah, certified breathwork facilitator, Reiki. I studied PT and gym instruction, timeline therapy, hypnosis, NLP, all sorts of things, right? They all have a place and value. But if we speak about fasting specifically, so like I said, GNM GHK is the foundation. And what I find that fasting facilitates is two things, a physical and emotional side to fasting. So physically, when we fast, in my perspective, we give our body a break, is the simplest way of explaining it. And so in that break, when our body is not having to send all its little army men to digesting, it can send its energy and its little army to doing other things like repair phases of biological programs, cleaning things out, just giving the whole system a reset. And so I find that particularly for things like digestive issues, indigestible morsel conflicts, just resting that whole system it's like it supercharges propels forwards the biological healing phases. It gives it like real space for that. And there's a couple of other sort of biological programs that I find that it's really helpful for as well. But there are some that are contraindicators. So there are some that I don't recommend if you're running a certain biological program that you fast. A liver conflict, a starvation conflict would be one of those. If we're already in a starvation conflict, it's probably not a great idea to go and put, something that the body might recognize as starvation on top of that. So yeah, it's very much independent. It's really down to the individual as to what is appropriate and not. Then when we come to the emotional side of things, again, I find that fasting gives us this real space. So many of us use food as a push it down kind of mechanism. And when we take that out of the equation, all sorts of things come up instead. And so I find that there's a real clarity that comes with fasting, and that can help people both find the DHS and also come to points of resolution within themselves. And that's kind of what I use a lot of my other tools for. Breathwork is an amazing tool for coming to your own inner clarity around possible resolutions and finding events in our past that fit the DHS moments as well. So yeah, that's I guess in a nutshell how the two kind of weave in together. It's a huge conversation. Like there's so many tangents I could take there, but yeah, feel free to fire away, Kristen.
Wow, that makes so much sense. And I love the way you're flexible. It's like it's not a hard and fast rule, that it's, a panacea that everybody fasts for all of this, which is what you normally see in the health space where, fasting is good for everybody, period. But actually, it's not. It should be really qualified. There are certain factors, like what you said, it shouldn't be used for a lot of other biological programs, like for example, also in the cancer programs where there might be emaciation that's happening, you wouldn't really want to use fasting. And I love what you said, that there are some where it's contraindicated. But in your experience, have you seen a magic window of fasting, the magic length of fasting in your experience?
Probably not, actually, to be completely honest. Again, it's so unique to everyone, right? And there's so many different forms of fasting too. So the kind of fasting that I was guiding people through was between 2 to 4 weeks, depending on where they're at, their body weight, their vitality, all sorts of things. But then we have, intermittent fasting as well, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is a daily fasting or a 2 and 5 kind of scenario. There's so many different forms, but even something as small as like a 3-day fast can be really amazing just for kind of resetting the system. But I just have to stress again, it's so unique and independent. Like I couldn't say, like you said, there's no one hard and fast, scenario for anyone. It really needs to be a case by case. And there's a lot of things we need to look at to make sure that it is appropriate for the person. Like, for example, at the moment, I haven't done any fasting for a few years because I've been pregnant and breastfeeding. And I've also just recently discovered that there's something going on in my body called a leptin resistance. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but it tends towards a weight holding. And fasting is contraindicator because it's a stress. And basically with leptin resistance, stress exacerbates that. So we want to keep as much stress out of the equation as possible. So it's just like, yeah, it's person by person, case by case. But yeah, something as simple as a 3-day fast can be beautiful, right up to, much longer fasts. I've personally fasted for the month of February, so 28 days is my longest fast, and that was a complete life changer and game changer for me, but it's not for everyone. So yeah.
Right. And 28 days, is that completely no food, or was it a water fast? What kind of fast did you do?
Yes, that was a cold pressed juice fast. So consuming only cold pressed juices and herbal teas and water. So no solids at all. And yeah, it was a life-changing process for sure.
Wow, I can imagine. And what I love is that it's a guided fasting service that you do, that I do believe that clients do need to be guided. They can't just be told, okay, stop eating and stop drinking everything, just have cold water pressed juice or cold water, or do fast with coffee, and that's it, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that can happen. Have you seen any complications that have happened, or any weird awakenings or epicrises that.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I've had people come to me and be like, I just did this massive fast and now I have these issues because the body and mind haven't been prepared for that process. So it's really important that, yeah, we prepare both the body and the mind for the process. We don't want the psyche to be shocked by the fast at all. We don't want it to go into a starvation program, or, there's other programs that it could potentially set off. That's really important that there is a level of consciousness and awareness to somebody starting a fast. And so, yeah, personally, I do believe that if you're going to explore fasting, it should be in a guided container to begin with. You can certainly run with it after that. But preparing for the fast and breaking the fast are really crucial elements that are very important to get right, both on the mental and physical level.
Right. And how do you break the fast? So first of all, how do you prepare, and then how do you break the fast? What's the process and what goes into that?
Yeah, sure. So mentally preparing for the fast, it's things like, setting up your psyche to understand that you're not going into a period of starvation, you're going into a period of abstinence by choice. So making sure that you feel at a core level that food is available at any time if you want it, if you need it, but you're choosing to abstain. So there's processes we use to kind of set the mind up for that. And on a physical level, I generally have clients complete a bowel detox before the process as well, and have a few weeks of kind of really reining in the diet and cleaning up the diet to eliminate a few things first: coffee, alcohol, processed foods, that sort of thing. So the body's kind of eased into it. So yeah, they're two important elements in the preparation. And then at the other side with the break fast, it's really important to do it so slowly and really have it as it's almost like a bit of a ceremony. It really needs due diligence, the break fast. I did not. I learned the hard way. And so now I have a story to tell so that my clients can learn from me, because I did not listen to my mentor and I was like, food, amazing, and ended up, like naked on the bathroom floor, thinking that my stomach was going to explode out of my chest. It was extremely painful. So please, if you're going to explore fasting, make sure that your break fast is done slowly. The digestive enzymes of the body kind of, go a little bit dormant. So we need to make sure that we introduce foods bit by bit, one at a time, introduce single food groups, keep your portions really small. Your stomach does shrink. And so, yeah, you need to gently ease yourself back in there for sure, is one of and funnily enough, like mentally, sometimes people find the break fast harder than the actual fast. And they're kind of like, there's almost a little bit of a grieving process of letting go of the fast at the end there. So lots can come up there too. So yeah, high levels of self-awareness and just go gently.
That is so interesting. And I understand the mind body connection that goes into a fast, and it has been used in rituals, ancient rituals, and it's also practiced in religious festivals and holidays and all of that. So yes, there definitely has to be it calls in the demand to connect the mind and body. That's really powerful, and I love that you're doing that. But I see that you have so many tools in your arsenal. And so you have NLP, there's Eriksonian hypnosis, timeline therapy. Do you use a blend of all of your modalities with fasting, or do you use them individually, one after the other?
Yeah, there's like no set hard and fast to it, right? It's so unique to the individual. And this is what GNM GHK is all about. It's about not putting people in boxes. We don't run by diagnosis labels. We look at the unique individual and their unique symptoms and what's happening. A diagnosis label doesn't necessarily mean a lot in GNM GHK. We've really got to break it down to what the individual is experiencing, and then relevant to that, the tools that I use are very unique to the individual and their needs as well. And I do love that, I have that wide range to choose from now. I'm sort of a serial learner. I love learning. And so, yeah, different people need different things. And I draw from that toolkit depending on where they're at and what they need.
I totally agree. I have the same. I use more or less the same kinds of tools, timeline therapy. I'm looking Eriksonian hypnosis, like conversational hypnosis. And, it really depends on the person because it's so bio-individual. And depending on where their psyche is at or what they're ready to receive or release, then you would match the appropriate tool. So it really is good to have different kinds of modalities because you never know what's going to hit you at that very moment, what that person really needs.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, a word of caution too around going too hard, too much, too fast, too much, too soon is a real thing. Like we need to be really assessing each individual case, including ourselves, where we're at in that timeline as well. What's right for one person in one cycle of their life might not be right for them in another cycle of life or with another biological program. We really have to, step into the person's shoes and really deeply feel into where they're at and what they need and consider safety elements around that as well in determining, what we use with them.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not sure if you're aware about, how GNM GHK, it's very dogmatic. So I'm in the educator course right now with the Pillar Academy, and they're very much into causal therapy. So basically they don't really like hypnosis and EFT and all of that. And it's because Dr. Hammer didn't teach that at all. He just used causal therapy. But for me, I'm in that mindset where, well, I'll use causal therapy first. Let's look at the root cause of this diagnosis. What's the psychobiological wiring behind this particular SBS or Senseful Biological Special Program? But how can we assist the psyche gracefully and safely through this process? Is that something that you also encountered in your own practice over the past 8 years?
Yeah, 100%. And I absolutely appreciate where the, steadfast traditional GNM GHK community are coming from because there is an importance in retaining the purity of the information and not letting it get, too watered down. So I get that. And simultaneously, in my experience with people, these tools can be helpful because sometimes the practical situation can't necessarily be resolved, or it's in the past or, there's so many different scenarios here. So yeah, I have found things to be really helpful in the resolution processes of supporting and nurturing one's psyche and mind through resolutions. There's something else in my mind there for a second, but it's gone now. Thank God. The importance of, so one thing I do want to speak to here is the importance of, I believe, coming from my filter, my perspective, the importance of conscious resolutions as opposed to subconscious resolutions. So I'm very, very careful with in fact, to be honest, I don't use a lot of hypnosis anymore at all if we're talking about biological programs, because if we are bypassing the conscious mind and working subconsciously, we run the risk of that not sticking per se, I guess you could say. It's really important to me that someone is very, actively conscious of what their DHS was and the resolution. So I'm just really careful with modalities that kind of work beneath the person's conscious awareness, if that makes sense. Because I do think there's value in what they kind of share there in the traditional community.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I am certified also in conversational hypnotherapy, but it's a very, 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 very last thing I ever use. In a series of sessions, I may use it or I may not, but it's not the only modality that I use. So would you say that NLP would be something where you kind of meet the conscious with the subconscious, where there is a conscious awareness, but there is also the participation of the subconscious in the process?
Yeah, I think so. Like most people that you speak to who have explored and worked with NLP or experienced an NLP session, they have a conscious awareness of what the issue was and what the resolution is. So that's the important part to me, is we can definitely there are definitely things we can do to work with the psyche and work with the brain to rewire the way that things are seen and experienced. And I find that highly beneficial in finding some resolutions, but just so long as the patient is aware of what's happened and what's going on and how things were and how things are now. That's, I guess, the main differentiation.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And, it goes along the lines of what Dr. Hammer would teach is that only the person's psyche can heal itself or can make itself whole.
Yeah.
And therefore you're just the guide or the person who supports them while they go through it. But it's really just that person's psyche. And a lot of times, I'm not sure if you've experienced this, that we don't even need to go to NLP or hypnosis or timeline therapy. It's just a matter of, hey, this is your DHS. This could be your DHS. And this is what happened. For example, when there are cancer patients and you know the exact DHS, the exact biological conflict, and you let them know, and they have this big aha moment, like this light bulb. Yeah, now I know. Sometimes that's enough. There's no need
Totally.
to go
Yeah.
further. The psyche just drops the weight on their soul, and then we just manage fear, their fear around death and their fear around the functions of their body. And when that is attenuated, sometimes it's just really simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that's partially because if we can bring that awareness to it, the psyche understands this is actually no longer problematic for me, right? Like I'm in a different place to what I was then. And that isolation factor. So, the three criterion of the first biological law, caught on the wrong foot, unexpected, isolated, all the things there. And when we take that isolation factor away and somebody is able to sit there in front of you and deeply share what they really went through, there's such relief in that as well. And feeling like, they're not alone in this and they don't have to hold it all in. There's no skeletons in the closet anymore. And really recognizing that event, like you say, can absolutely, bring resolution just in itself in recognizing it and acknowledging it for sure. And I find that, like you said, a lot of the time we don't actually even need to use these tools. Like you said, NLP, all these things. What I find potentially even more valuable than those things is learning to ask really good questions. This is like a pivotal art piece in the flow of GNM GHK and helping someone come to their own resolutions is learning to ask really good questions, or quality questions as I call them. I used to do a process called the brain bath where we kind of like take an event and go through a process where we ask all these questions to come to a different perspective on an event. And so, yeah, getting good at asking questions is perhaps one of the most valuable things we can do as a GNM GHK consultant.
Yeah, I love it. And it's also like kind of like making it a game, like converting your fear into curiosity. So what did your psyche pick up this time? What are your tracks? What are the extended tracks? What happened before the symptoms came out? And it does become like a game. It does become fun. And then when you kind of laugh at it or don't take it too seriously, then it becomes easier. It just becomes the weight just lifts off just like that, just so quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Something that I think is really funny, right? When I was a kid, there were a couple of things that I wanted to be. I went through all the different phases of what am I going to be when I'm older? And some were really creative. I loved floristry and art and stuff. But two of the ones that really stuck with me for a long time is I wanted to be a detective and I wanted to be a pediatrician. And I didn't formally end up being either of those things through, conventional systems. However, right now, I'm pretty much a detective and I'm working with a new form of medicine. So I think that's really ironic, but it is detective work, right? I would put our little hat on and get our little glasses out and really dig in and investigate and ask those questions.
I'm getting goosebumps because I heard from, was it Robert Greene in his book Mastery, that your 5-year-old self knows exactly what you're going to be in this world. And then, when you get your period and all, you kind of set that aside. And then later on, you kind of pick it up in middle age when you're you don't no longer have to be a mother and wife where, you're pretty much done with that. It comes back. And that is so cool that, you wanted that you're actually doing that. And there's so much truth to that.
In a completely different form. Like I never imagined I would be here, right? But I think it's so fun.
It is so cool. So Nellie, did you have any, for yourself, like did you have any GNM GHK personal success stories? Like in your own body, did you have any SBSs that you resolved through GNM GHK or had realizations in a later time retroactively looking at past programs?
Yeah, definitely. So many, there's so many convinces. Definitely like I won't say reoccurring, but quite a poignant one for me is I have a tendency towards self-devaluation conflicts, as so many of us do. Yeah, especially, I would say especially women in the world that we're living in at the moment. And those of us who are really driven as well and value, intelligence and these sorts of things, we do tend to have self-devaluation. Um, yeah, as a commonality. So lots of back pain and neck pain that I've been able to resolve really well through the GNM GHK principles. That's been definitely a highlight for me because there was a time where I thought I would, my mum had lots of back pain and I thought I would just have to live with lots of back pain my whole life. And now when something comes up, I'm usually able to nail it pretty quickly. So, yeah, that's really cool. I had some really migraines and visual disturbances there for a while. And was able to come to a resolution of those. So they're not in play anymore. There was a frontal fear in play there, as well as, gosh, I can't even remember now. There was something else. Anyway, but yeah, that all resolved. So that was really cool. And I was able to see the threads that had a lot to do with my kids and fearing for their safety when they weren't in my vicinity. And that was really interesting to resolve that one. And then probably the biggest one for me, and if anyone else has heard me on a podcast, you probably have heard this story already, because it's one that I share. And it is like, heads up warning, some people might find this too much information, but I ran a really gnarly thrush program for a couple of years. And so it started when we moved into the house that we're in now. It was our first home that we'd bought as our own home. So that was, about 8 years ago now, 7, 8 years ago. I started, ran for 2 years, and I was well into GNM GHK by that time. So I was like determined not to take medication or just, do something to make it go away. I really dug deep and explored into that. And I knew I was fairly certain that it had something to do with a sexual experience that I had when I was really young, and that then kind of like added up through experiences as well. So there was something about moving into this house that instigated me moving into the resolution phase, but not completing it. It was a hanging healing for 2 years. And so I went on this exploratory journey to basically resolve this experience from when I was really young. And literally the day that I put the final puzzle piece into this scenario, everything, like all my symptoms went away, literally overnight. So I remember having, and the final puzzle, the interesting thing is, right, that this journey needed to take 2 years, because who I ended up being at the end of that 2 years, had I not had that journey. So if I had just resolved this hanging healing and program overnight, right when it started, back at the start of 2 years, when we moved into this house, the journey, I wouldn't have had that journey that I went on to come to that resolution. And that journey actually changed me as a person. There was huge personal evolution in that for me. And so I'm a completely different person now as to what I was at the beginning of that. And if I hadn't had that journey, I wouldn't be. So I think there is a trust in the divine timing and order and process of these things as well that needs to come into play. But yeah, the day that I put the final puzzle piece into place with that program, it literally wrapped up overnight, and I've never had any symptoms again since. So that was like my absolute kind of clincher moment, my convincer moment with GNM GHK. Yeah, it just made, all of it made so much sense to me. And I literally remember that moment. Dr. Harmer says the stone falls from the soul.
Yes.
And a terminology that I've actually been exploring with my community lately in the academy that I run is a return to innocence, is what also that moment feels like when the stone falls from the soul. When you really hit that resolution point, it is a return to innocence. It's a return to just like, and I remember that moment so distinctly, just like literally that weight falling off of my shoulders. So yeah, that's probably the height of my personal experience there, that one.
Wow. Kinesthetically, I can feel the relief. Kinesthetically, it's just so strong, because I've felt that before as well in my own programs. But two things, I mean, what's so wonderful about what you said is that it became, what was in the way became the way. And that's so beautiful. And it was kind of programmed by your younger self in a way. And another thing that you said is divine right timing and divine right order, that it unfolds in its own time. And there is rhyme and reason, even if it doesn't seem like it. But it also depends on the person, whether they choose to make it such, to make it that way. Sometimes you could use it to just disintegrate yourself and become smaller. But you could actually look at it as a way to become bigger and better, which you did. That was amazing. And Nellie, just to make clear, this is a thrush. Was this oral candidiasis? Is this
vaginal? Yeah.
vaginal?
So it was, as far as I can work out, it was obviously like I didn't have my CT scans done, but as far as I can work out from my symptoms and my experience, I believe it to be an ugly conflict with a male, a gender conflict. That set off the program. So yeah, that was a really interesting process to go through. It was pretty full on.
Yeah.
Fun, and I'm sure so many women have experienced this. And I guess like just a word here, ladies, like you don't have to live with this. It doesn't have to be reoccurring. It can absolutely be resolved naturally. There's so much. It's a really interesting process. What I kind of touched on there and what you've alluded to as well is, one of the hidden gems of German medicine, shamanic healing knowledge is that it gives us the opportunity to evolve personally. So we get the choice to mask our symptoms and remain as we are, or to follow the symptoms and find extraordinary personal transformation and change within following that path. And I think that's really, this is woven into the fifth biological law, the quintessence, divine timing and order in all things. And I really believe it's a beautiful, beautiful hidden gem part of GNM GHK is the opportunity that it provides us to tread that path.
I love that, Nellie. And my heart chakra, I'm sorry if I'm being woo-woo, but my heart chakra is like bursting wide open here. There's so much hope for everybody if they see it this way and through the lens of Germanic New Medicine. It's just fantastic. And you're right about the quintessence. There's nothing is ever right or wrong. There's nothing binary. There's always an intention, a biological purpose and intent. Everything is biologically significant as deemed by nature. That is so beautiful. I love it. So Nellie, what are I know, do you do consultations? And next is, if you do, what are the big, bright, successful stories that you've experienced with your clients?
Yeah, I do consultations. At the moment, I'm trying to guide people into our foundations and practitioner courses for a number of reasons. My capacity is quite limited. I get, literally a lot, dozens and dozens of inquiries each week, and it's far more than I can facilitate. And one of my highest values is empowerment of the individual. And so it's one thing to work with someone, but it's another to really understand and embody the knowledge and have it for a lifetime, to even, pass down to your kids and your loved ones. So yeah, I'm really trying to direct people into the GNM Foundations course and my Prac Academy so that they can understand the information for themselves and be supported in that process as well. So yeah, that's kind of like a driver for me at the minute, because I just feel that we can impact a lot of people in that way. And in terms of success stories, yeah, so many. Like, it's been such a joy to work in this space for the last 8 years. Some of the, so many headaches, lots of headaches and migraines that I've seen completely resolved, and that, it can be a really debilitating one for people, headaches and migraines. It might seem like, a seemingly, somewhat small symptom, but it can be really debilitating. So lots of resolutions of those. I've definitely worked with a lot of women's health. So a lot of menstrual cycle work, missing menstrual cycles or menstrual cycles that are not kind of in sync and going well. Fertility is one that I've worked with a lot. And we have babies on the ground, so we definitely have some cool resolutions there.
Yes.
What else has been amazing? Digestive system stuff. So there was one particular case, Crohn's, labeled as Crohn's disease or Crohn's. And we got that down to understanding that was to do with a situation where this woman's house was broken into, and nothing was actually taken, but it was ransacked, destroyed, and it was left in a real mess. And she got that phone call to say that her house had been broken into while she was at the pub eating pizza. And so we started an indigestible muscle conflict, right? And everything that's in that realm. And so when we kind of were able to detach those two things, she was able to go back to eating pretty much whatever she wanted, which is super cool. So that was a really cool one. But just so many, really lots of back pain and neck pain, I guess, because that's been my experience too. That is one I love working with. And it's it's a real, like it's an amazing entry point into GNM GHK. I don't know if you've worked with neck and
I
back
have.
pain and shoulder pain. It's
Oh,
extremely satisfying,
yes.
right? Because we can get a resolution, we can get a change quite quickly. Like usually in one session, I've seen people go from, 13 years of neck pain up at a level 8 to 10 down to like 0 to 2 in 60 minutes in one session, which is just phenomenal, when we really nail it. So yeah, they're probably some that stick in my mind as some of my favorite,
Wow. That's
experiences.
amazing. You said you had a visual conflict. Was it a fear in the neck, or was it like a visual
Yeah.
muscle? Was
Yeah, it was the fear in the neck. Yep. And so thank you for jogging my memory. So it was the fear in the neck. That was causing the visual distortions. And the fear in the neck was to do with my children. So it was my children's safety that I was concerned for. There had been a couple of things where they'd been in the care of someone else and uh, basically, like long story short, they'd been in the care of somebody else and that person hadn't met me where I was meant to be meeting them and I couldn't contact them. And so like I was really caught off guard with that because they had my kid and I was like, I don't know where my kid is and I don't know where they are. And so, yeah. And I noticed I kept a diary of when I would get these visual distortions and it was happening almost every time after my kids were with someone else. So if I had someone, come into my home and look after them, a new person while I was working, or if they were out with friends or the attachment, the track was there and then when they would come back into my care, then the resolution phase would start and I'd get the symptoms. And then that instigates. So what I had to do as well was separate. So the migraine was separate to that. So the migraine was like the frontal fear of the visual distortions and the fear in the neck. And
nice.
so I thought it was all kind of one program. But when I broke it down, I realized that I was running two and one was setting off the other because to begin with, I was really scared. When these started, I didn't have a great knowledge of GNM GHK. And so I would go into this and it was quite frightening, right? Like, because I lose peripheral vision and I had distortions and it was weird. So that was instigating the migraine. And once I was able to separate and understand that the visual distortion was not dangerous per se, then I was able to knock out the migraines first. So I would still get the visual distortions, but I wouldn't get the migraine that followed up. And I was able to I could see myself going through the two-phase diagram. It was so fascinating. So I'd get the distortions and I would know that they would last about 10 to 15 minutes and then they would subside and then I would just be absolutely wiped. I'd have to just lay down. I was completely fatigued and I would just need to let that rest. So that was PCLB, right? The tail end of the healing phase. And so I could see myself moving through that two-phase diagram, which was fascinating. But it was great to knock out the migraines first. And then when I was able to nail all the different tracks that I had attached to that and my fear for my kids, basically, then I haven't had one for a while now.
Wow,
So,
congrats. Oh my God.
Thanks.
Amazing. And that's how nuanced it is, right? It's like so much exploration, investigation. You really have to be a good detective. And tracks are just so interesting what the psyche records at that time as an extended track or an original track, things of that nature. And somebody like you, somebody who's felt it in her own body, first of all, can be a really effective guide for people like this, for people to know what their DHS is and what their tracks are, and then to nail it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So what are some of your favorite programs that you've worked with? What are some of your big moments, your big aha moments?
I have somebody with introductal breast cancer that's in healing phase, and it's the bloody, oozy, pussy, smelly part, and the breast is 3 times its size, and there's no fear.
Wow.
Just out waiting for it to get smaller in the next 8 to 9 months. I find that when you manage their expectations and let them, understand nature, that, a tree doesn't grow back in a day. It needs months in order for even the first shoot to come out. So we have to go with nature's timeline. So things of that nature and things like that. And there's no secondary conflict. There's no secondary fear of death conflict, death fire conflict, or self-devaluation conflict or liver conflict with that. And it's just a primary conflict and that's it. And she understands it and she's completely fine.
Yeah, that's amazing, Ellie, because the breast can be so tricky to work with in that context. Not
Yeah.
so much the program itself can be tricky, but like you're saying, the secondary programs there can be, yeah, they can be the devastating ones, to be completely honest, like when we start to add them all up. So yeah, well done keeping her calm and celebrating her as well for being able to keep herself in that fear-free space. That is amazing. Beautiful. I love your
Absolutely.
analogy with the tree too. Super cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And wait, non-GHK, but I read this in your website and it piqued my interest. It's your dream home. You said you were a single mother for about 5 years and then you manifested a caravan and you went around your dream home on wheels with your daughter who was 2 years old. How was
Yeah.
that? What were
Yeah.
the big epiphanies that came out of that?
And that was like such a cool trip. So yeah, I was like, so I had a restaurant when my daughter was born. So life was pretty hectic. I was like a sole proprietor and basically a single mom. And then I sold the restaurant and I was just sitting at home and I was like not coping with it at all. This is shit, excuse my language. But so yeah, I bought a caravan and we took off. So this is when we left Adelaide. So she was 2.5. And yeah, we had this like 1970s caravan that was like simple but did the job. And I was pulling it with my Subaru Outback, which is not like a massive touring car, right? Like it did the job, but it's pretty funny looking back. And anyway, so we left Adelaide. One of the pivotal points of that journey was that I had planned to go west first. So there's this turn off that like you go west and you basically start your journey across the Nullarbor. But I got to this turn off and I just kept going straight. I didn't turn. I didn't turn off. And so I ended up going through the middle of Australia instead of to the west of Australia. And I completely reversed my trip. And that was like one of those sliding doors moments, right? Because where that took me, what that meant was that I was up in Darwin when there was a big skydive event on, and I was a skydiver at the time. And I ended up meeting my now partner at that skydive event and so many other friends. So it just like that sliding doors moment is so crazy. And that was one of the coolest times of my life that I've ever had. I loved that journey with her so much. Another moment I remember is when I was on that road up, the one that I wasn't meant to be on. I crossed over, I think I was crossing over the border of like South Australia and Northern Territory. And it was like that, it was starting to come into, like afternoon sun. There was just this glorious sun pouring in my car. And I'd been having a pretty rough time back at home in Adelaide. And I just had this moment where I was like, oh my God, I've been spending 90% of my time giving energy to like the wrong things and the wrong people. Not that the people themselves are wrong, but they and I were not conducive and aligned for that time and space of our lives. And it was like that moment that was like, oh my God, what have I been doing? And it was such, again, like just a relief moment. And yeah, we just had this incredible trip. We saw so much of Australia. It was so beautiful. And, like I believe that I didn't know GNM GHK at that time, but I believed I resolved a lot of programs on that trip as well. And, one of the per se therapies in German medicine is also nature. It's reconnection with nature. There is like a bit of information there that I don't want to butcher this, but that we came originally from the sea, from the ocean, that we evolved from the sea. And so going back home to the sea and back home to the ocean, things like magnesium baths and swimming in the ocean a lot can be really soothing for programs as well. And I was definitely on the coast a lot during that trip and spending a lot of time at the beach and a lot of time in the ocean. So yeah, it was a trip of a lifetime. And I met my now partner. So
Yeah.
happy days.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Look at this. It feels like all roads lead to GHK.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, because I came into GNM through him. So my partner's name is Dan, and my partner's friend's name is also Dan. And so Dan introduced me to Dan, and Dan introduced me to GNM GHK. So had I not turned left, if I hadn't gone straight, if I had turned left at that intersection, would I have come to know GNM GHK?
Insane. Your 5-year-old has been guiding you ever since. Insane. Gosh. Nellie, did you say that you're pregnant now?
No, I've got a 2.5-year-old. So I've got a 13-year-old and a 2.5-year-old.
Okay.
That's, yeah,
Okay.
still breastfeeding.
Still breastfeeding. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, was going to ask if you were, how do you apply GHK to pregnancy? Because pregnancy in itself is a special biological, is a senseful
Mm.
special, blah, blah. Okay, Ellie. Senseful biological special program. So I was wondering how.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess you have a 2.5-year-old and you had already been in GHK then. Did you apply some of the concepts to that, like your inner awareness?
Yeah, definitely. It was just an awareness. And I guess I conducted life a bit differently in this pregnancy to what I did in the beginning. I was just conscious of things like, not being around loud noises and things like this, can cause Down syndrome caused by a double hearing conflict. And so at a pivotal point in the development, it can be set off by loud noises or by hearing conflicts. So I was just really conscious that I knew I was going to be in sympathetic state for that first part of the pregnancy and then parasympathetic state for the latter 2/3. And so just working with them, I fortunately have never, like with both pregnancies, I haven't had too many symptoms or too much trouble. I haven't really had a lot of nausea in either and that kind of thing. So I've been pretty lucky, but I was just mindful of like, okay, in this first trimester, I'm just going to really make sure I'm living in a way that's less likely to instigate potential conflicts. I didn't have any scans up until I had one scan, and I requested that we wait until I think I had it done at 20. I reckon I was like 21 weeks or something, but I held off because a scan, again, can instigate, a lot of conflicts for the child in that developmental stage. And I asked for that scan to be very quick. I was like, just go in, check what you need to, and get out, please. And it was interesting standing up for that. Like that was fought against. I went in and, they were horrified that I hadn't had a scan yet at 20 something weeks. And, there was a lot of invitation for fear there, to put it that way. And I was like, no, I'm good. Just get in, do what you need to do and get out. Thanks.
I love it. I love it. And the birth itself, did you stand up for yourself as well, stand up for your rights? I know how they kind of force the vaccine on them as soon as they get birth. There's also potential for a lot of separation conflicts that can happen at the birth. How was that for you?
Yeah. So again, like, I don't know whether to call it lucky or not, but both of my children have been home births, which is really beautiful. So I was a home birth with my mum. My mum is relatively mainstream, but I was a home birth. And so for me, that was normal. That was like, okay, this is what we do. This is how we birth. And so I'd never really considered even going to hospital when I was first pregnant. So, I had a home birth with my daughter, which was very unusual at that time and space. And I had a lot of friends very concerned for me. And so fortunately, that pressure is not quite so much in a home birth. I had a midwife who was not aligned with vaccines. She gave me both sides of information to look at, and I went and looked at them. And as soon as I looked, any kind of depth into them, I was like, no way. And to be honest, it never felt right in my gut anyway. And then when I looked at both forms of information, I was like, no way, not happening. So fortunately, I didn't have that conventional medicine pressure on me in that immediate sense. And the separation was never going to be an issue for me there either, because I was in my own space with my child. So both of my kids are exceptionally healthy. And I really do think that has a lot to do with how we birthed and how we live and how we parent. GHK has made such an impact on our parenting and lifestyle as a family. So she was home birth, and then my son recently was home birth as well. And again, no real pressure. Still get a bit of pressure from like the mainstream medical nurses want to do like home visits and stuff with me, but I declined. So because they're not, they are pro-vaccine, and then they're not into co-sleeping, which we do as well. For me, look, and please be aware, like, there's no right and wrong here. I 100% trust everyone's journey with, pregnancy and birth, and this whole topic can be such a tricky place for so many mothers. And I'm very, very conscious of instigating, any guilt or shame or, I don't want to invite any of that. I 100% trust everyone's journey, where they're at and what they choose for their children. But for me personally, this is what felt right and aligned. And I believe that it's got a lot to do with our state of well-being in our family.
Absolutely. Thank you. Before I get into all the courses that I'm so interested in all the courses that you're offering, I wanted to ask, as you mentioned that maybe fasting is contraindicated for breastfeeding. Is that true? And why is
Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend it. Definitely not during pregnancy. And I wouldn't recommend it during breastfeeding because you're giving all your nourishment and, everything out to this child. And so then to not be consuming nourishment while you're also putting out
yeah.
in the quite a big way, it doesn't feel aligned for me. Um, for me, breastfeeding is a time to be focusing on a lot of nourishment and nurturing really, in all the different ways, mentally, physically, emotionally. We need to nourish the mother for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And a lot of women, I think, need to hear this. I think it sometimes can be dangerous when something is touted to be the best thing in the world for your health. And then, they take it on during times when they shouldn't, where
Mm,
they're taking
no.
care of the life force of another human. So
Yeah.
yes.
Well, in GHK, so basically for as long as you're breastfeeding are effectively they liken it to PCLB, right? It's the tail end of healing phase. So for as long as you're breastfeeding, you are kind of still healing from that epicrisis of giving birth, right? And so it needs to be, a time of nourishment, a time of rebuilding, a time of just, rest and rejuvenation.
And I love it when you see it from a GHK lens. It just makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
so let's get into that. Nellie, let us know, do you teach this kind of thing about pregnancy and birth, and what are the other courses that you're offering?
Yeah, so I kind of weave everything into my two main offerings at the moment are the New Earth Wellness Empowered Health Academy. That's my kind of like umbrella academy. And within that, I have the GHK Foundations course and community. So that's a self-paced course that you can join at any time. It has 6 modules plus a waiting room in there. And it's self-paced, but it's also highly supported because we have our community and you have touch points with me. We have monthly calls and we're about to add to that as well. It's a really, really supported, nourishing community. And that's for, the everyday person to come and learn German medicine, Germanic healing knowledge, learn the basics of it, but most importantly, learn how to implement it into our lives, because that's what I found was really, really missing for me when I first started out studying it. It was like, this information is amazing. It all makes sense, but how on earth do I use this and how on earth do I embody this? So I focus a lot on, how to utilize the information in that course. And then that leads into my holistic practitioner integration course. And I call it a holistic practitioner integration course because there is no such thing as a GHK practitioner. We can be consultants or we can be teachers, but we can't actually do anything to anyone. So that course is a much more advanced course. That's a 12-month course. And that is really an invitation for holistic practitioners to come in and learn GHK in depth and be able to, use it kind of like I do as a foundation to my work and see how it integrates with what you're already doing and really, up level client results through weaving that information into practice. So they're my main 2 offerings at the moment. And I'm really putting a lot of energy into growing those both in numbers and community, but also in the value that's in them. So we're always adding calls. You get lifetime access to both as well, which I think is really important. And I know that not a lot of people offer that. I do, because there is so much more information still to come in the GHK world. Some of Dr. Harmer's works haven't even been translated into English yet. He was an extraordinary man, a genius, but he was one man in one lifetime. And I just feel like we're going to keep expanding this knowledge. So once you pay to join those, it's lifetime access. So you get access to the calls going on for life. You get access to the Facebook community for life. You get access to the information and any updates I make. And I really value nurturing my community in those spaces. So they're my main 2 offerings at the moment. And then, for individuals, I do offer one-on-one work with fasting, with fertility, and with, GHK consults too. Yeah.
Fantastic. And would you repeat again all of the internet portals of communication? So your IG, FB, and your websites?
Yeah, for sure. So website is currently www.nelliebwell.com. Instagram, I'm over at Nellie_New Earth Wellness. And Facebook's still under Nellie B. Well at the moment. We are transitioning everything over to that New Earth Wellness. But it's a little bit in both. One foot here, one foot there at the moment. So you'll find me somewhere either way.
Okay, we'll include all of that in the show notes so that everybody can just click. And I believe that where you're at, we have the same time zone, right?
Yeah.
My
Cool.
gosh. Imagine that. Yeah. So our community, the Filipino community can actually join yours with no problem. Because I
Yeah.
find it's so hard to join the European and the North American communities because of the time difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the reasons that I put together these courses too. Andy is a great friend and
Yes.
colleague, and I've studied with Andy, and Melissa's a great friend and colleague. And, there's so many amazing offerings over in the US and Europe, but it is often really, really difficult for the Aussie and Asia time zones.
Right.
So yeah, really servicing this kind of area and time zone for sure.
Yeah. So we'll connect with you then because we're the same
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
My final
Amazing.
question, as with everybody. So Nellie, if you were given a magic wand and this magic wand will click into the ideal world, what would that world look like for you?
Man, that is a huge question.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Do you know, like I deeply love my life as it is at the moment
Uh-huh.
in a whole. If there was something I could change, it would be an invitation for, I believe that the more we step into a state of radical self-responsibility, this creates huge change in the world. So that alongside an invitation for people to live biologically, right? Living logically with their biology, reconnecting with self, each other, and nature. I think these are some pivotal things that would really bring our world into a space of,
Yes.
pure love at the risk of sounding
Oh,
cliche.
yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, my life is pretty ideal as it is. I love where I live, physically I love where I live, but they would be my invitations. Yeah, living biologically, reconnect with self, each other, and nature, and step into radical self-responsibility. And I would be so fascinated to see what kind of world that would create.
My gosh. And that's what makes you an ideal person to learn all of this from because you come from that place. And I think it's a beautiful vision. It's definitely also I share in this vision with you. This has been wonderful, Nellie. Thank you so much for giving
Yeah.
us your time, and I look forward to reconnecting more and more with you and your community. And I'll make sure that the Filipinos connect with your energy and your knowledge and wisdom.
Thank you so much, Ellie. Thanks for the opportunity and the invitation to share.
My pleasure. Bye.